Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to start the ball rolling by reading you a sentence from Computer Lib Dream Machines, actually two sentences, or one sentence, I guess. So you've got this in a section that's called CAI, that's Computer-Aided Instruction, General Wrongfulness, which is one of your great subject headings.
one of my general attitudes.
There you go. And you write, and this is 1974, computers offer us the first real chance to let the human mind grow to its full potential as it cannot within the stifling and insulting setting of existing school systems. Do you think that potential is still there? And what do you make of the current state of those school systems?
Well, the point is, what ruins education is the structure of schools. That you see, when people talk about, quote, education, what they mean is supporting the existing school system. And that is exactly what's wrong. The existing school system, with its system of curricula, of gradation, of stamping out, attempting to stamping out homogenized minds, and at the same time reducing knowledge to a system of a small number of testable points, greatly reduces the human potential and the human spirit. And I don't understand quite how this can ever be fixed within our educational system.
Did you hope at one point that the sheer transformative potential of computers, wisely designed, might be the thing that could turn the tide?
Yes. And wisely designed and giving freedom to the student. But of course they haven't given freedom to the student. They've simply tightened the manacles and created tighter curricula, which in some areas is a good thing because people need to know specific stuff, but in terms of enlightening the mind, enlightening the spirit, is a very bad thing in general. My principal priority has been to create a document structure that I consider decent for the human race, and despite ridicule and misunderstanding. To me, a document is any media package. So a movie is a document, and a hypermovie is a document, and all the kinds of documents I imagine which combine all the different media will be documents, but at present we can't show them.
And you agree with McLuhan that the nature of the medium is not detachable from the content that's being expressed, is that right?
The nature of the medium is indeed the pool in which you're swimming. McLuhan had extraordinary insights about media, and yet I should tell you that when I had lunch with him and tried to explain about hypertext, he was absolutely, he didn't get it, whatever. He went off on a completely misunderstanding speech about how computers could not vary their operation in any way. Essentially not getting it to 3 decimal places.
So he did not understand that a computer as a universal machine was a simulation laboratory for potentially anything. He was simply
Exactly.
so
Exactly.
he thought of computer code as the antithesis of the flexibility he sought in mediated expression.
Exactly so. And so I tried to tell him that the computer would make possible new media and new structures that were barely imaginable, which we do not have, in my view, and he didn't get it. But his insight that the medium itself contains much of what is being transmitted, this was powerful.
Seems very strange that someone who was primarily famous for his study of television and other kinds of electronic mediation could not then make the leap to understanding the computer as a meta-medium. And I found that that's a hard thing to explain to people. How do you breach that barrier and not say it's just a TV set, it's just a typewriter, it's a universal machine, it's a meta-medium?
I don't know. And today I find that the kids are coming out of high school not learning to program. 20 years ago, they came out of high school having taken programming courses. Something has gone seriously wrong. Now they use their iPads, and I hear kids say, nobody invented the internet. Or that Tim Berners-Lee invented the internet, which is worse. So that nobody now understands where we're in. When I was a kid, I knew who had invented radio, or rather I knew who everybody thought had invented radio. Actually, Tesla's patents were upheld. But I knew who had invented the movie, except he hadn't. But the point was that there at least was a history behind these things that now is missing. Everybody thinks the world of today suddenly appeared from the brow of Zeus, and we should just all love it. as distinct from considering how it ought to be better.
Do you think that part of the issue is that computers are new in a new way?
They're not new in any new way. They're old now, and essentially the iPad has made the computer disappear to most people.
I see. So we're now in a world of appliances. We're not even in the world of computing anymore.
Nobody knows it. Nobody knows that we are. And so the first thing, I taught a course last fall, and I was knocked sideways by finding out that the students did not know what computers were. and these were like second year, third year, fourth year honor students, and that completely disoriented me, meant I had to start the course over.
And what did you do when you started over?
Frank, my colleague Doug Deco, gave them a brief lesson, a month's lesson in Python language, which was very helpful.
And that did make a difference?
It did. It did indeed.
Well, and your emphasis seemed to be, and you tell me if I've got this right, that we think about the possibilities for the complex and rich portrayal of ideas in very impoverished ways. We have all these resources available to us that strike out across the entire expressive range of our human capabilities, and we use a vanishingly small amount of them.
Yep. Well, that's true. And that's partly true because it's up to teachers in classrooms to deliver this stuff, and they are so overworked and so boggled with appalling administrative crap, and they have to work within the curriculum, so they have a very narrow presentational realm. And also, these packages, they can't buy the packages that are available, so they could use free packages, but once again, that's extending beyond the allowed curricula, as I understand it. I have always objected to the word technology. Technology is a highly misleading term, and if you watch my piece on YouTube called "The Myth of Technology," you'll see why. Because the term is used to cover a vast variety of stuff and make it all seem alike, and also to excuse a vast variety of crud, which is foisted upon us under the name of technology, like, quote, trust technology, or the notion that you can't criticize technology. Well, you can indeed criticize technology. But first of all, technology is anything we use that we're not born with, for God's sake. So technology is needles and thread. Technology is knives. Technology is frying pans and boats, rowboats. And the fact that we now have microcircuits doesn't change that in principle, except it changes the degree to which we are controlled by the technological thingies and environments people create. I do not consider myself a technologist at all. I consider myself, well, I have long considered myself a philosopher and filmmaker. When I got out of college, the person I thought of as a role model was the French filmmaker Jean Cocteau, who made Beauty and the Beast and also wrote philosophy and poetry. And I made, when I got out of college, I had made, though not finished, my first film, which you can watch on YouTube. It's called The Epiphany of Slocum Furlough. It's slow moving, but I'm very proud of it. It tells a story. It has a likable hero, and it has a happy ending, and a philosophical ending at that. But by the time I was 19, I had my own magazine at college. It was called Nothing, and there's the first issue. And here's the second issue, and the third glorious issue was kite-shaped. And you had, as you turned the pages, you had to rotate the magazine to keep reading it. And it was quite complex to put together. And I showed the mock-up to the printer, my friend Ned Powell, and he nodded, and so I thought I had essentially gotten his approval for it. And in fact, I did it all by myself because he was absolutely astounded when we put it together. And I was so pleased when I met the editor of The Nation, Victor Navansky, and he said, "Ted Nelson, not the Ted Nelson." And I waited. I didn't know if he was going to talk about hypertext or what. He said, "Not the Ted Nelson who published Nothing magazine." I was so excited. So So basically, I was a project person. I caught fire in college as a project person, and doing projects of whatever kind was the heart of my being. That's all. That's what made me happiest. Although I was geared up for 2-week efforts, so 2-week projects were really the thing for me. Although I had no idea how long some of the others would take. So when I made the first film, though, suddenly I realized I was a perfectly, I won't use the word perfectly, I was a competent filmmaker, as you will see. I've got 2 story films on YouTube. And so that was what I've most enjoyed and wish I could do again. Then when I got into computers, to me, it was just another movie projector. See, a movie maker has to understand the technicalities of whatever he's dealing with. He has to understand cameras and lights and sound, understand horses enough to tell the guys who wrangle them to go that way, and understand music enough to tell the orchestra what he wants, and so on. And so figuring out what the computer should do was, to me, just another technical aspect around creating something people would want. In this case, a new medium.
Were you aware of the mother of all demos?
Oh, sure. Well, I had visited Doug 2 years before that, so I had seen all of that part. I'd seen I'd seen a goodly part of it in his lab, and felt thoroughly. I felt attuned to him to a certain degree, except that he thought hierarchically.
I see.
And that was always our sticking point. In recent years we became very close, but unfortunately we were so busy with other things that there was no time to discuss real issues till he was dead.
And how did you become aware of his work? How was that conversation started?
I'm not sure, but I arranged for it. When my boss at Harcourt Brace, I was with a publisher at the time, when my boss Bill Joanich wanted to go out to the Bay Area, I said, and meet Richard Atkinson, the CAI guy, whom I disliked intensely. I said, let's also visit Doug Engelbart. So I knew about him from writings in '66. His notion was of sharing ideas, of deep collaboration. And so he explored many possibilities, and the NLS system, which has never been duplicated, although you have, various .com startups that are doing parts of it, the NLS system stands majestically alone for all the things you could do with it. Although, as I said, it was hierarchical. The world is not hierarchical. I finally found the Greek philosopher who backs me up on this. The two iconic Greek philosophers are, of course, Aristotle, who emphasized hierarchy, and Plato, who emphasized ideal types. But the man who talks about intertwingularity, that's Heraclitus. He was the guy who said you can't step in the same river twice. He was the one who saw the world as a booming, buzzing confusion of complicated, overlapping stuff, and that is my view of the world. And to represent this world of complicated, overlapping stuff, we need media that are able, in which you may create complicated, overlapping presentations of depth and richness and clarity. And that is what I've been that is what I've sought to do all these years. So the Xanadu concept is the notion of creating compositions of many parts, having arbitrary structure, not hierarchical necessarily, though hierarchy is permitted, and being able to create interactive structures around these systems. So generalizing documents to the max has been the objective. And the little demo we now have that shows text and a composite text built of many parts is only the beginning. So as soon as I took this computer course in graduate school, that was my viewpoint. My influences were more Shakespeare and Shakespeare with his Oceanic Mind, by the way. I love that description of him, meaning he surrounded and touched every topic and was able to comprehend every level of human life. And that to me, that's the kind of understanding we want to be able to communicate, a surrounding oceanic view of things. And so that, well, I hadn't heard that phrase. Shakespeare did influence me enormously as a child. And being able to understand all levels and also to see. My two greatest heroes when I was a boy were Frank Lloyd Wright and Leonardo da Vinci. And Wright, da Vinci was able to see what others looked at and did not see. And Frank Lloyd Wright was able to create things that others could not imagine. It created wonderful spaces to be in. That was my inspiration for design, that there are magic combinations. And seeking the magic combination has always been the very center of my thinking.
So with regard to the Oceanic Mind, which is very much the kind of concept space we're trying to encourage in our students, do you think that quality of mind can be taught, or can it simply be identified and encouraged? Or how do you feel about that?
I have no idea. I've certainly met many people who had difficulty seeing the big picture. And so that's what we're talking about, seeing big pictures. And that, what that means, of course, is also having a lot of contexts to refer to, because a big picture refers to many contexts simultaneously. And seeing the big picture geopolitically means knowing about different countries, knowing the ways of the world, of treachery, of agreements, of war, of negotiation. Seeing the big picture in architecture means knowing physics, knowing beauty, knowing elegance, knowing money and the politics of getting backing. So in all of these, to see the big picture and have an oceanic mind means learning as much as you can about as many different things as possible. And learning, taking courses is not necessarily the best way to learn. It's a good way to learn some things, but what can I say?
Well, in 1974, you write, instructional sequences aren't needed at all if the people are motivated and the materials are clear and available. And when I share that with my students, that often the response I get is, but of course students aren't motivated. There is no reward for motivation within the system, rather the opposite.
An extremely important point. An extremely important point. So the question is, what is your motivation? Is your motivation to get a degree and then a dumb job? Or is your motivation to be a learned person? I always wanted to know as much as possible. And if that's not your motivation, then you're one-legged as far as I know. Your mind has only one leg.
Are you one who believes that motivation and curiosity is that they are birthrights, but that the schooling system suppresses them? Or
that's certainly Bucky Fuller's position, which I've always accepted.
All right. Have you ever been tempted to devise a school of your own?
Oh, frequently, but I have enough projects to keep me going for the next 160 years. So I haven't talked about my philosophical work at all. But I've got hundreds of thousands of notes. You see, the reason I got into computers is partly that I just wanted a way of taking notes that would be satisfactory, and using file cards, which I was doing, was extremely clumsy. And I wanted to be able to use the same file card in many places, and that's what led to the transclusion concept. And from there, it became the Xanadu concept. But in the meantime, philosophical work is divided into 4 parts now. Schematics, which is the study of structure and representation and abstraction. Normatics, a word I did not coin. I thought I'd coined it, but then I found out it had existed long before, meaning exactly what I intended, which is the philosophy of shoulds, ranging from moral philosophy to rules and laws and their enforcement. Gamics, which is my term for the structure of situations and maneuvers within situations. which, by the way, is what Fox's normatics, you see, because in arbitrary moral philosophy, you say, well, wouldn't it be nice if everybody did this or that, or here's the justification for moral behavior, but what happens when you make rules? And then when you make rules and try to enforce them, well, that becomes gaming, because now enforcement leads to evasion, and evasion leads to more enforcement, and that leads to sophisticated normatics, which is entirely different from naive normatics. Anyway, so gamics is the structure of and representation and the manipulation of situations. And finally, the part that bears on thought vectors in concept space, what I call idemics, which is the representation of the tokens that we present our ideas with and argue with and manipulate as we redesign ideas. And my examples are designing a sitcom, theology, and software design. Yeah. So that in all of these, we're manipulating ideas and assimilating ideas to them, or idemes. So an ideme is a unit, is a token of thought, which is likely to be changing, which frequently changes its meaning every minute as you are redesigning or rethinking it. So those are the branches of my philosophy as presently constituted.
You've constantly been led in the direction of self-publication, which, as you know, in the academic world has a bad reputation. Yet you have been not only successful but extraordinarily influential with your self-publication. So this is part of.
Let us not forget that T.E. Lawrence of Arabia was a self-publisher. That Samuel Taylor Coleridge was a self-publisher. That a great variety of great persons have been self-publishers. It's only Publishers Row, the commercial publishers who've tried to give self-publishing a bad name. But if it's good enough for T.E. Lawrence and Samuel Taylor Coleridge, it's good enough for me. Getting it out there, getting it publicized and sold, that's another matter. I mean, very few people have bought my autobiography, even though it got 5 stars on Amazon. What can I say?
So there's
some 50,000 people bought Computer Lib, but I was cheated by my distributors and didn't see the money. If I had, I wouldn't be in the situation I'm in now.
Which returns to the basic qualities of character that you philosophize about, we all are concerned with: wisdom, discernment, the ability to find motivation within oneself, the persistence to stick with things that may be unpopular while being open enough to accept correction. Is character something that can be part of an education without simply being indoctrination?
Well, when people say character, don't they mean honesty and uprightness and decency? I don't know. I don't know. I have known 1 or 2 psychopaths, and I don't know whether education corrected that. But, I mean, most people are decent, and if they weren't, we'd be in we'd be in an even worse mess than we are. But I don't know. To me, the Oceanic Mind notion of having many contexts and having seen many levels of human life, as well as understanding aspects of science, this is the hard part. So having a multi-contextual background. If I were the place to start would really be nursery school. I do consider myself an artist. I do, in the memory of Frank Lloyd Wright, I have the same notion of a grand structure that has unity, and trying to bring together the parts, trying to create a working field on which fabulous media can be presented is unfortunately, has unfortunately gripped me all these years.
The role of the imagination is one that has engaged the minds of artists. It's now engaging neuroscientists. It seems to be the way in which innovations can emerge. We have some capacity for thinking outside the bounds of the thoughts we've already had. Would you say that the imagination is one of the things that's driven you most completely through your life?
Well, of course. But I would also add, I believe, a certain clarity of imagination. And that is because what I learned in college was seeing through seeing an initial idea through to the final detailing. Following through that initial idea and changing it constantly, but always adapting the idea to the mechanisms available.
Doug Engelbart described his visions as epiphanies or flashes. Would you say that your vision came to you with an all-at-onceness like that?
If there was a moment of epiphany, it was seeing that you could put screens on a computer. I said, hey, screens, I can do that. I'm a movie maker. So now what will it take to make the kinds of movies we will need for education and literacy and scholarship and an intellectual future? Because I wanted people to be more intellectual. Of course, they've gotten less intellectual. But yes, I think the epiphany was seeing the computer screen, but I don't remember a moment. Software is a branch of filmmaking. That's what I've always said. It's because in a movie, you start with an initial idea of what you want on the screen, and then you attempt to realize it through many different techniques. And a movie is a series of presentations on a screen that affect the heart and mind of the viewer. So what is software but a series of presentations on the screen, interactive presentations on the screen, that affect the heart and mind of the viewer and interact and have consequences? So you can either say it's something else, or you can say it's an enhanced movie with other possibilities. But the point is that I think that to learn interactive software, you should study your Disney and your Orson Welles and your Frank Capra and your Eisenstein as the fundamental work. And the technicalities of programming should be then learned as a part of making it come about. But realizing that it's the presentation and the unification of that presentation, that's the thing to stick with. Frank Lloyd Wright, his stuff was extremely unified. I was amused to learn that aside from the Frank Lloyd Wright's Guggenheim Museum in New York, which is an internal spiral, he had a house in Los Angeles that had an external spiral staircase. I think it was threatened recently. I don't know if it still exists. But that's unification, taking a couple of ideas and making them into a special space. So a filmic space, or a presentational space, or the phantic space of software.
When you say by phantics, I mean the art and science of getting ideas across both emotionally and cognitively. This, again, far ahead of its time. Educators are now beginning to realize that emotion is not antithetical to reason, but that, in fact, part of the wholeness of human experience, neglected at our cognitive peril.
You quote David Hume. The reason is, wasn't it Hume? The reason is, and by rights should be, governed by the emotions.
How does that become something other than anarchic or chaotic?
Civilization is based upon the assumption that if we band together, we will be better off. So that banding together, even though our emotions point us in different directions and make us want to throttle the other guy, this is the important thing. So there is a point at which it all does break apart. But remember, anarchy is not necessarily what people think. I believe that didn't Catalonia elect an anarchist government in 1936 or 7? So it's not necessarily a war of all against all, but rather a ground of disputation within the general agreement of civilized society.